gonna get started. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. We're gonna get started. Our speakers for today will get us going.
Yes.
This is Africa on the Precipice. Is it time for a revolution? So Ngozi will get us
Is
going.
it time? It is time. Oh,
Yes.
we said, is it time? It is time. Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to the first Fireside Chat for UIU 2025. My name is Ngozi, you can call me MG. I'm a marketeer at heart. I'm a talkative by passion. I'm sitting here with Nnamdi Chieku. And Nnamdi is the author of Africa on the Precipice. The era of African hegemony has begun. He'll tell us what African hegemony means in a second. But what I love about this book, and I've read the book, it's available on Amazon now, right?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, all platforms.
Okay, perfect. Ooh, that is. Anyway, at the end, I really think this is a good session to start UIU with because it will passionalize you for our continent because Nnamdi is filled with so much passion. And what I love about this book is he not only talks about the problems that Africa is facing, but then he proposes a solution. So in addition to networking, finding your husband and your wife, because that's what people came here to do, let's be fair. I think that it's going to be such an amazing session. Now, Nnamdi Chieku is the author of Africa on the Precipice. He's the spokesperson of ADAP. ADAP is the African Defense and Advancement Federation. He's the spokesperson for that, and he has been featured on platforms such as Nigerian News Info, The Gorio, Arise News, Channels TV Book Club, and many more, discussing this book. So without further ado, Nnamdi.
Thank you.
Right.
Before we start.
I think we have a video. You want to play a video first?
Yeah,
Okay.
before we do that. Given that this is an Igbo gathering, I wondered if there was anybody here, my ward. No?
Is there an elder?
Elder.
And don't be ashamed of your age. At this point, an elder is apparently once you're above 45.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
That's what they say.
So
No elders.
we say this in jest, but I bring this up for a reason. And the reason why I bring this up is that traditionally in Igbo tradition, you can't start an event like this without Igbo origin. It's actually an obscenity. So it begs the question, are we Igbo people? Because you can't be Igbo by definition if you don't do Igbo things. If you don't engage in omena. It has to Igbo. By the way, I'm not Igbo for my. As of Igbo, but I'm not Igbo for my. But I'm going to ask English. If I know I can't one day make it. What I mean? I'm not Igbo for my 100%. So I wanted to bring that up, because this is a theme that is going to run throughout this discussion. And it's a theme about embracing and going back to that which is authentic to us. So, but I wanted to make that point that whenever we do this kind of gathering, whether it be in your home or in a ceremonial environment like this, and I warn you, and it's not something we should forget or take lightly, because this is actually the essence of what it means to be Igbo. This is our communication with our gods, with our ancestors. This opens a conversation with peace when you give the incantations, and it sets the environment and the mood. These are the wisdoms that we have, and these are the wisdoms that will resuscitate us and get us back to glory. Okay.
And it's interesting, Nnamdi and I were having a conversation about this a couple of days ago, and I said, this orgy. He said, but it's not just Igbo people. It's so, I know we're at UIU, which is Igbo Unite, but whether we're in an Ikiti convention or some kind of Coastal convention in South Africa, Africans have tribal traditions that we've all lost because of jeans and t-shirts. Which in itself is not a problem. But then going back to what is authentically who we are is the point of this entire thing. So we're going to play 2 videos before we start.
To set the scene.
Okay, to set the scene.
For centuries, Black Africa
Africa tried to produce numerous powerful and wondrous empires across the continent. There was a kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia, the Malians, Shohai and North empires of West Africa, and great Zimbabwe of East Africa. Our people were mighty, wise, respected and known throughout the world. Then, in the 15th century, we began to lose our way. Arabs and Europeans who first came as slaves liberated us began to steal our riches and enslave our people. Our leaders, rather than defending our people, were led astray by capitalism and started fighting with each other until our wonderful kingdom went no more. Our people were taken far and wide, and because the world had forgotten how great we were, everywhere we went, we were laughed at, and so our dignity was lost. But behold, there was a prophecy that one day the ancestors would send us a blueprint to create a juggernaut that would vanquish our enemies and help us build our empires once again. That juggernaut is called the African Defense and Advancement Federation, ADA. It is a hero created by all African countries joining together to become one entity. ADA's mission is to bring peace, prosperity and kindness back to Africa. With the blueprint that our ancestors have given us to build ADA, we thrive once again and take our place as the dominant custodian of the planet.
And the influence that says, if we could get Roberts to exploit the resources for us to develop our economy, we wouldn't mind the whole lot of using elimination.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris instead of actually
hold on a second, hold on. People in the left, they're going to watch this, they're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think that this common interest should one day make Europe decide to act as a political entity that will defend its own interests, including by means of the commitment of its armies.
Now, this is the evidence.
So that the Afro-American in the United States will be working in conjunction in a coordinated program with those who are in Cuba, and those in Brazil, and those in Venezuela, and those throughout the Caribbean, and Haiti, and in the West Indian Islands. And in this way, we actually get strength.
We've taken a loss for a couple of centuries does not mean that we can't come back. We may have lost the battle, but we have not lost the war. And position our continent not only to just survive or maybe even thrive, but to be dominant. Africa doesn't need the world needs Africa.
All right. So, Nandi, what is Afro-Hedonism?
Okay.
I just define it because I need to do an intro.
No, absolutely. So Afro-Hedonism is an ideology that contends that we need to rediscover and adopt authentic African socio-economic and political systems and models in order for us to best thrive. Not only just us in terms of Africans, but also globally, right? Because we have a lot of ancient wisdom in our culture, in our ways, in our mores, and so on. And so that's what really Afro-Hedonism is about. And effectively, what I say about Afro-Hedonism is that for the last few centuries, in global kind of history and global affairs, we have been operating under a Western capitalist kind of system. And the writing is on the wall that we are not going to be able to survive, not only just as Africans, but as humanity, if we continue down this road.
We is who?
Everybody, right? So that's Africans, everybody on this road. That we are not going to we're not going to survive as humanity if we continue under this kind of global capitalist system that we have. So that's what Afro-Hedonism is about. Yeah.
So we're going to, this book has 7 chapters?
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into chapter 1, chapter 3,
Yeah.
and chapter 7.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed this because I started off and I was like, oh, this is a nice read. Oh my gosh, he spent some time in Guinea. You know, he talks about Africa, and I'm like, yes, look at all these problems. Then this one dives into some deep things. I'm like, he gonna go to jail. Oh my God! But chapter 1 talks about rules to the battle of civilizations and how Africa lost his battle.
Yeah.
Tell us about that for a second.
Very good. So, I think the best lens under which to understand global geopolitics, what's happening, for instance, in Ukraine today, what's happening between Israel and Gaza, what's happening at various configurations all through the world, is that we are in a battle of civilizations. And we have been engaged in this battle of civilizations since humanity started, right? This is a game that we play with each other. And I want to characterize what this battle of civilizations is like. One, it's an amoral game. There's no morality to it. As we say, we're one area, right? It's really a game that we play that is governed by gangsterism. Might is right. If I'm bigger than you, better than you, or if I have better technology than you, and if I can subjugate you, then I do it. It's as simple as that. That is the battle of civilizations. And despite what we say today, despite all the multilateral institutions and the so-called neo-democratic liberal institutions and world order that we have today, beneath it all lies this battle of civilizations. When China, for instance, goes and builds out its One Road, One Belt initiative, where it's been going around investing in various geopolitical zones, that is the battle of civilizations playing out. Non-confrontational, but nonetheless, that's what's happening. And so in chapter 1, I basically, and in fact, before I go to chapter 1, I'll kind of give you the context in terms of why I wrote the book in the first place. So I've been doing business in Africa for the last 10 years, and I've been in the private equity space and also investing as an entrepreneur in various sectors, in energy sector, logistics, and so on. And I'm a millennial, I'm 41 years old, and I'm sure a lot of you I'm sure a lot of you don't remember our parents always used to tell us that one day we'll be okay. That is, you people will go and change Africa, right? I think we all heard that. And so I believe that. I believe that vehemently. So back in 2009, 2010, when the whole Africa Rising narrative, right, was going around, I decided I was going to be one of those entrepreneurs, one of those change agents to go into Africa and to realize the change that we wanted to see. And to be honest with you, I went in and it was hell. I think as a lot of us who've done business in Africa appreciate. It was not only hell from the perspective from the sense of doing business, but I really got to understand the depths of the issues that we have on the continent. And I'll be very frank with you. No matter how bad you think Africa is, you multiply that by 10. Yeah, it's that bad. And as we have this conversation, I'll continue to elaborate. But I ended up in Guinea in 2019. I was doing business in Guinea. I was living there. I was Guinean. I was going to mosque. I really embedded myself in Guinea. And over the last kind of 10 years I've been visiting and doing business in Guinea, I saw the country go from experience various economic, social, political configurations that resulted in the coup that happened in 2021. And when that coup happened and I saw Guinea go from A to B over that 10-year period, it is at that point that I realized the amount of trouble we're in, not only in terms of Guinea, but in Africa in general, okay? And so to kind of bring it back to this battle of civilizations, when Guinea happened, and then also I saw what's happening in Sudan, in Ethiopia, in Nigeria, South Africa, you name it. By the way, 80-90% of our population in Africa today, as defined by the World Bank and IMF, is still living in poverty. And that means living on less than $5.50 a day, right? So we went from, over this last decade, we went from this message of so-called change and hope to the continent seemed like it was back in the 80s or 70s or something, with all these coups that were happening. And when that happened, I kind of made the decision. I said, listen, I'm either going to be depressed by this, because obviously I lost a lot when the coup happened, or I am going to look into it and maybe even write about this to understand where did we begin to go left. And I'm very specific about saying where did we begin to go left, because when I started looking back into African history, one of the things that struck me is that, you know, we talk about Africa today in terms of why can't we get it right? But no, we were getting it right. And we're actually getting it right until about the 16th, 15th century. Before then, we had thriving empires. We had Aksum Empire, Malian Empire, we had the Luk Empire, the Songhai Empire, etc. And by the way, you don't build empires if you're very primitive people. You need strategy, you need technocrats, you need lawyers, you need mathematicians and so on to build your base. And I even count the Kemetic Empire as well, right? In fact, I even count the Igbo people an empire. And just to give you a little bit of background, I don't think any of you here realize how special you are in order to be Igbo. And I say this because archaeological and anthropological studies show that Igbo people have been residing in that southeastern Nigeria since 6000 BC. 6000 BC. 6000 BC, we had economies, we had our own currency, we had our community, political, and social models. To give you some more context, the great dynasties, the Kemetic dynasties of the Egyptians, where they built a great pyramid of Giza and so on, only came about 3000 BC. And then after that, the Greeks, right, with Acromedes and Homer and so on, came 2000 years after the Egyptians. But you know what the irony is? You name your kids after these people. We dress like them, we talk like them, we adopt their religions, we adopt their mores, and yet we are more ancient. We are more imbued with wisdom. And so, we started losing this battle of civilizations in the 15th, 16th century. Why? Because we started to interact with different cultures, with capitalism and different systems, right? No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And so how we reacted to that is really what started this last 500 years of what I would say we've been losing in the game of civilizations, okay? And the question is, well, why have we continued to lose? Obviously, the tactical reason why we lost is that we came across people who had more military might than us, who were more sophisticated in terms of military warfare and so on. But then the reason that we've continued to lose over the last 500 years is because of the loss of identity and a loss of spirituality. The identity aspect, I've kind of given you some coloration to that. The fact that, here we are and we behave, think, and act in the Western way, right? But then the spiritual aspect of it is also very important. Because in Igbo culture, it is very difficult, if impossible, and this is in most actually African cultures, to separate faith from socio-economic and political models. It is all intertwined. Omenan, right, is all intertwined. Because Omenan is not just about, Chukwu and worshiping of God, etc. It also governs the socio-economic and political aspects of our lives, right? So when we, for instance, let go of Omenan, and we started going to churches, or some people started going to mosques and so on and so forth, we threw away not just our spirituality, but also the socio-economic political models that made us great in the first place, right? And so, you see the manifestations of that. For instance, in the Niger Delta today, right, it is completely polluted and corrupted. We can't use the Niger Delta lands for maybe another 1,000 years. Why? Because we lost our spirituality. Because, by the way, in traditional Igbo, another kind of ethnic group, religions, they used to call us animists, so this is what they call us.
Call us what?
Animists.
Animus.
Yeah. And what is animism? Because, these are the things that they used to kind of put us down. We're animists and so on. But animism really is the ideology, or is the idea that all living things have agency. Right? All living things have agency. And this is true. A river today has flora and fauna and so on. And in our traditions, there were certain things you didn't do. In our traditions, you negotiated with the deities of the river. We worshipped them. We negotiated with them. It wasn't everything that we thought we could do that we actually went about and did, right? And because we lost that, we now see the ramifications of that in terms of economic, in terms of an environmental disaster that we currently have, right? So I say all that to say that for the last 500 years, we've been losing. I've given you some of the reasons we've been losing. And then I now realize that we're about to lose again in this century. But the consequences of losing in this century are going to be absolutely fatal for us. And nobody's having this conversation because everybody's vested in this, kind of capitalist world order where they don't want to shake the boat. But I'm actually here to tell you, this book is here to tell you, that we can't allow for that to happen. And yes, please.
You can smile. It's heavy. It's very heavy. You know, I said to Nandi that if every African had the passion for Africa that you have, perhaps these protests that are breaking out all over the place would not be breaking out. Anybody seen any footage from Lagos today?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even a...
Yeah.
It's not, this is not... I was in Lagos in... when did we do Occupy Lagos? I don't remember. Pre-COVID. And we went out to protest, but we had DJs and caterers. I'm not going to lie. Yes. We went to protest, so we were very serious about it. But the DJs were on point. And we had caterers, people were friends like Paul. You know, but we were very serious about it. And that's the problem with what he's saying. And when I see the videos from today, it's a different landscape. People are hungry. People are angry. And people are suffering. If we move to chapter 3, where we talk about a hyper-capitalist system, and if you can, write questions that you have, because we'll leave 30 minutes at the end. I know we have a 90-minute session at the end for questions. We're talking about this hyper-capitalist system and, you know, what you call the curse of turn by turn. Let's move into chapter 3.
Into that.
What do you mean by the curse of turn by turn, using Nigeria as an example?
Yeah.
And you don't have to start with that.
No problem. So I kind of made this statement that we are kind of on the precipice, right? We've been losing this battle of civilizations for the last 500 years. And then we're now on the precipice. And I want to kind of give a little bit more coloration to that before I talk about this whole turn-by-turn system, okay? And how I'm going to do this, I'm going to, because when I wrote this book, I wasn't considering or taking into consideration just the African existential dangers that we face, but I was also taking a look at the global Black community, right? One of the things that I should have mentioned to you is part of the reason why we've been losing this battle of civilizations is because we have not been paying attention to geopolitical affairs at key points. We weren't paying attention when slavery went from a universal enterprise that everybody engaged in to become an exclusive enterprise in the selling of Black bodies. We weren't paying attention when foreign forces, specifically Western forces, took over the continent within a 10-year period, and they went from 10% kind of colonization of Africa to almost 90% within that 10-year period. We weren't paying attention when neo-colonialism came around with the multilateral institutions and the lending institutions and so on, and put us in a situation where we have these debt traps that are happening throughout Africa. And we're not paying attention again today. And the consequences of not paying attention today, as I say, are going to be fatal, because in the battle of civilizations, if you're caught slipping, you're gone. Ask the Aborigines, they're reduced to about 3% of where they came from. Ask the Native Americans, ask the Carthaginians, the Mayans, and so on and so forth, right? So what are the dangers that we face today, as far as Africa is concerned? Number one, we are behind in 3 major economic revolutions, and about to be behind in the 4th one. We are behind in the agrarian revolution, the industrialized revolution, digitized revolution, and now you have the energy transition. If we fall behind in the energy transition the way we are looking like we are, the gap between us and the rest of the world is going to be insurmountable. One of the issues that we have when we discuss Africa is we never put a time frame to this renaissance that's supposed to happen. And I'm very clear in the book, if we don't restructure the continent by 2030, forget about it. It's done. And by the way, this isn't an opinion. This isn't a threat or a warning or imagination. This is a message to our people. And it's up to you to decide what we're going to do about that. The second danger that we face is climate change. Climate change is having, obviously, a global impact already. We see that. It's having an impact in terms of countries becoming much more aggressive geopolitically. In Africa today, we have about 20 countries with 14 military bases across the continent. So-called fighting terrorists and so on, trafficking, etc. But it's all nonsense.
Western military bases?
No, the Japanese, the Chinese. The Japanese, who have a pacifist constitution, have a military base in Africa, in East Africa. Why? Because the world already knows the secret that we Africans seem to not know, which is that we are going to be the losers of this next century that's coming, and everybody's positioning themselves for the next scramble for Africa. And it's happening right under our noses. And it's happening right under our noses because our governments take inducements in terms of financial incentives to allow them to build these bases without any strategic forethought in terms of why are we allowing this kind of military presence here, right? We also see a situation where foreign wealth funds are going around buying acres of land throughout Africa for their green initiatives, which is, you know, another kind of form of, for carbon credits and so on, which is a form of greenwashing. But we have a situation in places like Liberia where they're buying at least 5 to 10% of the entire land mass of the place. Now you have to ask yourself, what happens to those people, right? In Sudan, we are seeing slavery in broad daylight. In Libya, we are seeing black people being sold in broad daylight in this 21st century. And this is because of the economic dislocation that is happening across the continent, right? So these are the dangers that we face in the African context. In the Caribbean, where we have our fellow black descendants of Africans, and I want to take this opportunity to make it very clear to us as a community that to the extent that the black person globally is an underclass, it is due to the failure of us, the Africans. It is because for 500 years we have outsourced the well-being and the raising of our children, because I look at them, those in the Americas and the Caribbean, etc., as our children, and I say that as a term of endearment. We have outraged their well-being to others. And because of that, they've been abused beyond imagination. Imagine having a child today and just outsourcing. And for the last 500 years, we've been in a state of confusion. And because of that, they have suffered. And they continue to suffer those indignities, whether it's here in the US or in Europe and so on. So in the Caribbean, for instance, climate change is having an impact where within the next 10 to 20 years, those places are going to become unlivable because you're having all these storms, typhoons, and tornadoes, etc. They're not going to be able to rebuild fast enough. So they face existential danger. In Europe, we're facing right-wing extremism, where, for instance, in France, what used to be the National Front, which is now a National Rally, which is really an extremist, racist entity, is now almost has a significant representation in their parliament. And the Europeans have made it very clear, they don't want black people in their lands. Very clear. And this is throughout Europe. And then obviously, we now come to the United States of America, our beloved America. I want to tell you a story, just to give you some context. In 1850, the Afro-Argentine population was about 33%. Do you know what it is today?
The what population?
The Afro-Argentine population. It was 33%. Yes, sir.
0.
Actually, specifically, it's about 0.5%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know how it went from 0.5%? Or from 33% to 0.5%? Because there was a president by the name of Domingo Sarmiento.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Does everybody know the country? Tell me again the name of the Afro what?
Afro-Argentine. Afro-Argentine. So black Argentine.
So the black Argentine.
Yeah, exactly. So Domingo Sarmiento in 1850 looked around and he actually looked at the US and said, listen, if we let this black population to grow, within the next 20 years, they're going to double in size. We need to solve our black problem. And so you know how they solved their black problem? They underinvested in the infrastructure where black communities are, underinvested in the education, disproportionately sent the men out to wars where they were killed. And because of that underinvestment in their healthcare, education, etc., a lot of them were dying of various diseases, such as yellow fever and so on, right? They disproportionately imprisoned them, right? Some of them summarily executed them. It got so bad that there were more women than men, and so what they did is they married off the women to European peasants who were coming through, and so within a generation or two, finished. So basically it was state-sponsored genocide. Krishna, who's one of the recent presidents of Argentina, went back to Senegal on some kind of apology tour for this, etc. So you can look into this and read into it. Now, if some of these mechanisms that I just told you sound familiar, do they?
Yes.
They should. Because whether we accept it or not, this country has been trying to solve its black problem for the last 400 or 500 years. More specifically, since the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, they've been trying to solve their black problem. And so we see the manifestations of this in the sense that there are disparities by race across every known dimension, whether it's healthcare, income, you name it, it is not by accident. Now, what's interesting is this: life is unfair. So you could say, okay, black people happen to be at the bottom of the totem pole. But what worries me and what shows me the existential threat that our black brothers and sisters are in this country is what happens when we try and change the narrative, the situation. We say, okay, let's change the motto, the credo of the nation by changing the constitution. Absolutely not. They would rather burn this place down than to change it. Let us change the economic arrangements of this so-called experiment we call America, right? By affirmative action, right? Given economic empowerment. Absolutely not. In fact, in recent times, we've seen that affirmative action has been under attack at the Supreme Court in terms of education, in terms of the Fearless Fund ladies. These are black women who went out, raised a venture fund to try and fund and help. And they said, no, that was reverse racism.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, why don't we try and change the educational system and the indoctrination system that creates this disparity? And we bring critical race theory to the table? No. So what is it that you want from these people? These same people that you call animals, these same people that you say are lazy, unintelligent, etc. What is it that you want? And so it becomes quite apparent to me, and this is objectively speaking, looking at the situation as a consultant, that there are two spaces for the black person in this so-called United States of America. It's either subjugation or annihilation. You either remain an underclass or we'll wipe you out. And whether it's Democrat, Republican, conservative, or liberal, the discussion is really the spectrum of where they stand. Most liberals are like, you know what, they can ride on buses, they can live in our neighborhoods, as long as they know their role. Because quite frankly, we've had so-called liberal and democratic administrations for 161 years. This disparity hasn't changed. The Republicans and the conservatives on the other side are like, no, they can't ride on the buses. No, they need to go. Because you weren't supposed to survive. African Americans were not supposed to survive in this country. After they outlawed their youths and they were no longer slaves. And so, what the last 24 years of my experience watching the society has told me is that if we don't mobilize, and this is the African American community specifically, to empower ourselves by what I describe in the book as creating our own state, they'll be gone. Eventually, they'll solve the black problem. Because you cannot have a segment of your population that is subject to all these disparities that I talk about that will last. The only reason why African Americans have survived in this environment is because they are truly exceptional people. Historically, you've never seen a people who are in an enslaved class rise to power as they have done without war. At least war they perpetuated on their own. And then the second reason is integration, right? Integration in the sense that if you wanted to go and kill all the black people in Atlanta today, which street, which house would you start? It's true. And integration allowed our numbers to grow. Now, this same population, who upon emancipation had zero to their names, not 40 acres, not a mule, nothing, now have a spending power of $1.6 trillion. More than sub-Saharan Africa. And so my contention for the black population in America is that we have reached a point of political and economic maturity where we no longer have to engage in the American state, that we can actually create a state, and this is described in the book. So, yeah, wanted to just, take a deep breath to explain to you the dangers that we face as a global black people.
I want us to walk, because I'm looking at time, I want us to talk about chapter 7, because now in chapter 7, you start to propose a solution. Right? We start to talk about this concept of AfroHedonism. We start to talk about 5 rules for black people, and I want you to talk about these 5 rules.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you say it's a revolution. Now, I don't speak for everybody. If there was a revolution, I feel like I won't be in front. I'm saying like I feel like I won't be in front. I would use my voice and my but most people, you see that that's why there was a Malcolm X and a Martin Luther King. I feel like they were both fighting for the same thing, but tactics were very different. You know what I mean? And so as we're talking about chapter 7 now, what is the proposal? What can I do as me, as NG? And, you know, should I not? Where am I waiting? Like, what should I do?
No. So by the way, I want to clear something up because, you know, we've, this analogy you gave between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And this is actually a bit of a spurious difference between the two. Because, you know, we've made Martin Luther King Santa Claus, or the American society has made him Santa Claus and sanitized him. But that man was a radical. He was certainly a radical for his time, and you don't get shot and killed unless you're trying to do very dangerous things. His ideas at the time were very dangerous. Part of his ideas was, hey, not only are we black people in danger, but we are subject to an American state that is based on capitalistic leanings, that is a danger to all Americans. And so if we are going to move the needle on this issue and improve the black condition in this country, we might want to extend ourselves to other poor whites and so on, right? And that's when we cross the line, right? So this idea that Martin was this kind of nice guy, etc., no, that wasn't the case. He was a radical, his ideas were quite radical, and to the extent that you want to call liberation and living with human dignity radical. Because at the end of it, there's nothing radical about I want to be a decent human being. I want to have equal rights as you. Right? But such is the indoctrination that we've gone through that we now think that these concepts are radical. Now, before I start talking about the solutions, I gave you a global perspective of the dangers that we face, whether it's in Europe, the United States, or the Caribbean. And I want to bring it back a little bit to the dangers that we face at home in Africa, because this is the beginning of it. This is where the battle needs to be won. Because once the battle is won, the world has to know that we're coming for you. Because I consider myself, this new generation, I consider us, you in this room, what I call the new African variant. And what is different about this new African variant? We're different in 3 distinct ways. One, in my imagination, we should no longer be in the business of talking to people. We are under existential threat. I'm telling you people that by mid-century, by 2050, you are going to see slavery in an unprecedented level. We're already seeing it in Nigeria. We're seeing it in Sudan. We're seeing it in Libya. By the end of this century, we will be gone. Because what we have to understand is that foreigners have been coming to Africa for 500 years for land, labor, and resources. They no longer need African labor. They have the wherewithal with automation, AI, you name it. They don't need, we have always been an encumbrance to the land and resources that they need. And because we operate in a capitalistic world order, and if you know anything about capitalism, you know that capitalism demands continuous consumption, an increasing rate of return. This thing where every quarter your sales must be 10% higher, 15% higher than the last quarter. You need land, you need resources to sustain that. And in very developed economies, like in the Western world and to a degree the Eastern world, they're running out. Growth in Europe has been tepid for the last 10, 15 years, and the same thing with the United States. Where do you think they're going to get that growth from? And they will wipe us out like cockroaches. Our leaders are not talking about it. The heads of the multilateral institutions are not talking about it. The rich people in our lands, the Femi Otedolas, the Tony Elumelus, etc., are not talking about it because they are invested in it. And one thing, I want to make this point. One of the points that I forgot to mention to you is that we are in the circumstance we are today, going back to the turn-by-turn thing that I mentioned. Because our political and elite class, and I'm sure you know this, made a Faustian bargain as far as 500 years ago with foreign interests. And the bargain was very simple. The foreigners said, we're going to take what we want. And you, the houseboys, the so-called leaders, this has been the case since 500 years in Africa. We've been having houseboys of foreign interests ruling us. You take the crumbs and then just manage the rest of these yahoos for us. We engaged in the slave trade. It could not have happened to the extent that it happened without the sellouts amongst us, without the parasites amongst us, without the double agents amongst us. And these same double agents are still around, wearing multiple faces, running companies, and we're worshiping them, and we're hailing them. And these are the ones that are still spiriting away our resources on the continent. And so coming back to this idea of turn by turn, amongst them in this elite class, they have held wealth from generation to generation, and the only difference between one politician and one rich guy is, it's my turn. Nigeria continues to be what it is today. You know, I was telling Ngozi that for the last, since independence, we were complaining about hospitals that were dilapidated, roads that were unfixed, lack of education, etc. Now today in Nigeria, we've gotten to the point where we're complaining about food, basic food, because of this turn by turn, because it's always somebody's turn. Because when it's my turn, I chop with impunity. I take what I want, I eat what I want, how I want. This Tinubu, who is the head of APC, not too long ago was with Nadeko and was actually fighting for democracy, so-called fighting for democracy in Nigeria. He was a hero to many. He helped create APC to be a counterbalance to PDP and strengthen so-called the democratic nature of the country. But this same Tinubu, and if anybody who understands Nigerian politics, him and his crew are the same ones now that are effectively running an autocratic, kleptocratic administration in Nigeria. Right? Stealing left, right, and center. Why? Because it's about 10 by 10. And one of the things that I realized while I was in Guinea, and why this is so important, and really what gave me the shock, is that every single institution in Africa has been compromised. Our economic institutions and apparatus have been completely compromised. Our religious institutions have been completely compromised. Our political institutions completely compromised. And worst of all, the human capital has been completely compromised. Across that continent, 70% of our population cannot be functional in the 21st century economy. Tells us, which begs the question, why do these foreigners behave as they do? Right? So the question is, what do you do when everything, and by the way, I'm including myself, if you have touched that Nigerian system, me that I'm here, African Bambata, if you put me in the Nigerian presidency, give me 5 years, I'll teach Tinubu a new trick. We have all been compromised. Completely, every single one of us. And this is the awakening, the satori, the epiphany that I had, is that the rot in our continent is to the molecular level. So the problem is this: if you change Tinubu, who do you put in? Is it you? Is it you? Or is it you? It'll be the same thing. You'll be the same thing. It'll be this, and this is why the circle continues. This is why the 10 by 10 continues. And so we have to break the system. We have to deconstruct it and start anew. Because even a 10-year-old child in Nigeria today is completely compromised. If you take a 10-year-old today, you put him in a lab experiment with a kid from Japan, and you test their integrity, their ethics, etc., you'll be shocked. This is a 10-year-old. So it's too late for us. It's too late for every single one of us. The ones we're fighting for now, what we need is to find a way to give a chance to the unborn generation not to be infected by these systems that have perpetuated themselves in the continent for 500 years.
So build systems, talk about systems.
So this is where the whole concept of Afro-Hedonism comes into play, right? And so Afro-Hedonism is the ideology that is going to lead us out of this morose that we are in. Because you always need to center an ideology. And Afro-Hedonism says that we have to go back. That we have to go back to the authentic social, economic, and political models that made us grow great in the first place. And by the way, Afro-Hedonism is already happening. Right? Because ultimately, Afro-Hedonism is about valuing your own. If you go to Iceland today, they're dancing to Afro beats. If you go to Australia, they're dancing to Afro beats. You go to America, they're dancing to Afro beats. We have the world dancing. Why? Because we went back to our authentic rhythm and musical styles. Nollywood. You go to the Philippines, they're watching Nollywood. You go to China, they're watching Nollywood. Why? Because we found our own voice. So Afro-Hedonism, from a practical sense, is actually happening today. Because we see the value of what happens when we value and we put forth our own culture. Because the reason why they started playing Afro beats in Iceland, in London, and so on, is because everywhere they saw us, we were dancing like and enjoying and valuing it. And therefore they said, hey, this makes sense. It's the same thing with our political models. It's the same thing with our socioeconomic models. They were better. And so, part of what Afro-Hedonism says is that the world can no longer survive under Western and to a certain degree Eastern leadership and socioeconomic models. These cousins of ours, and I call them cousins because that's what they are, because I do believe in the commonality of human beings. But these cousins of ours have lost their minds. We cannot allow for a world where the West continues to govern and dictate affairs. They have lost the moral high ground. They have lost their thinking, really, to capitalism and to hyper-ethnocentrism. Look at how they're governing issues in the Middle East. Look at how they're governing issues in the Africas. We cannot allow that. Otherwise, we will be annihilated alongside them because their madness has gone to the point that they even want to destroy this planet. I'll tell you something. The Western world, specifically Europeans, they're no different from any other civilization. If you think the Europeans are bad, you never met the Mongols or the Hittites or the Assyrians. Those are some bad dudes that you don't want to touch. But the problem with Western society, with the West, this habit that they've developed, these cousins of ours, is that they started to do things at an industrial scale. They have a tendency to do things at an industrial scale. Everybody's participating in slavery. You people will come, you industrialize it. We have millions of people. Everybody, every civilization is engaging in commercialism. You come and you industrialize it and you turn it into capitalism. Every civilization, every group of people think that they are God's gift to earth. Oh, we're special. You people come, you turn it into full-blown racism. Where there's no space for any other but you and any other people that you interact with. And so, this world, this current world order, and the West have become a danger not only to us, but to themselves, to the planet itself. And we as Aboriginals, specifically Igbo people, and Africans, cannot let that happen. It's only been a few hundred years that the Western world has been in charge. Before then, these people were nobodies. They were learning from us. The Greeks were learning from the Egyptians. The Egyptians, despite all the, where are they? They were black. They were learning from us. Okay? And so Afro-Hedonism says, it's our turn. And what prompted me to take the line that because I was just like anybody in this room now. I'm a Igbo guy, hustler, completely dedicated to capitalism, making my net. In fact, I didn't even want to make billions, I wanted to make billions. That was my focus. That's why a guy who didn't speak French, who didn't know anything, would go to Guinea to go and do what? Because of money.
No lie.
Right? But I now have an appreciation of the existential danger the way I say, oh boy, this thing don't change you. We are not in normal times. I say it again. By mid-century, we'll see slavery at an unprecedented level in the continent. And if that happens on the continent, forget about the diaspora. By the end of this century, we'll be wiped out. That's how the battle of civilization goes. Afro-Hedonism is the ideology that is going to lead us out of that. Now, more. What is the objective of Afro-Hedonism? It's global custodianship. And I use that word specifically, custodianship, because the idea is not to replace one subjugating entity and ideology with another. It's to do away with this current world order and reinstitute it with us Africans at the top. Because I'll tell you one thing, I'm an athlete. I'm a very competitive guy. I am tired of losing. I am tired of being a global underclass. I am tired of having descendants of Goths, of Celtics, laugh at us. I am tired of having Macron, who's a 42-year-old sitting in France, the Prime Minister of France, dictating to me what I should do, or what we should do in Francophone Africa, in Africa in general. Who is he? What has he been through? Our parents might have taken that kind of nonsense, but I'll be damned if I have some small boy in France telling me what to do. We will not lose anymore, and Africans have to make the decision. Are we winners or are we going to be losers in this generation?
Winner, that's right.
But in order to be winners, you have to be ready to do the hard work. You have to be ready to deconstruct the indoctrination, the education, and these are things that I talk about in this book. You have to run the hard miles, bench press that bench press, sacrifice, focus, and align, right? So the objective is global custodianship. The strategy is to increase territories and institutions under African influence. The tactics is leveraging technology to bring this all together, right? Because, initially there was this concept of Pan-Africanism, and I say that I'm not a Pan-Africanist, I'm an Afro-Hedonist, because Afro-Hedonism is the evolution of Pan-Africanism. Because Pan-Africanism says, let's all come together. Oh yeah, come together to do what? You see, to the extent that Pan-Africanism has never yielded the benefits to the global black community is because it has not been compelling enough. Come together to do what? Afro-Hedonism says, come together to be dominant, to influence the world. If a bunch of Anglo-Saxons can climb out the small islands to come and do it, what are we Igbos doing? If a rabble of Anglo-Saxons are English people, 20, 30 million of them can just climb out of that small nonsense, with all due respect, they call a homeland, to come and dominate most, if not half of the world, to dominate us to the point that you, in this generation, are still naming your children Michael, Anthony, and Sarah. No, seriously, that's how deep it goes. That's how deep it goes, right? So the implementation system is this entity that I am calling ADAF. Like, how are we actually going to do it, right? Is a creation of ADAF. So ADAF is the African Defense and Advancement Federation. I call ADAF the juggernaut that Africa has been waiting for. Because in an environment, the main issue that we have in Africa is the macro risks, is this kind of up and down. One day the Naira is 1,000 Naira to the dollar. Next week is 1,600. You're doing business in Guinea, gingerly. Next tomorrow, there's a coup. So there's too much macroeconomic risk. There's no order. And so ADAF is an entity that, in spirit, is very similar to the likes of an AU, but it will replace the AU and ECOWAS and etc. because these are all compromised institutions. And ADAF's role is to mitigate the macroeconomic and political risk across Africa. ADAF is intended. There are 5 principles to ADAF that I'm going to outline to you. Right? 1 is the federalization of all sub-Saharan African states. And by the way, I'm very specific about talking about sub-Saharan Africa, right? And I don't include North Africa in that. Why? Because in this era, in this Afro-Hedonism era, in this era that we're in, if you don't want to be black, go. If you don't identify with being black, get out. Whether you're Tyler in South Africa talking about she's colored, whether you are in Eritrea and some of those East Africans talking about get out. To be black in this century is not going to be an exclusive club. If you're not with us, bugger off. Bye. You're not invited to the so-called cookouts. So I'm very specific about this because despite sharing a continent with us for 1,000 years, our North African cousins think somehow, some way that they're still better than us. Yeah, they're living in the same amount of depravity. we can no longer allow, in this new world order, in this new era that we're going to, we can't allow people who are sick to continue to infect us. So with all due respect, you stay there. We'll draw the border of Africa above the Sahel. Now, we give them a way to come back in, which is you have to change. You have to make equity with your black brothers and sisters a constitutional mandate. You have to reflect it in your religious institutions, and you have to reflect it in your systems of education. Unless you do that, and it will take them at least 20 years to do that, you don't come in. Because let me make this very clear. We're in a war. We are in a war. You don't recognize it because we think war is just a military affair. We're in an economic war, we're in a social war, and we are literally in a war. These people have military bases in our countries. I don't know how obvious it gets. And this is what I talk about in terms of us not paying attention to geopolitical shifts. This is how it happens. So we're in a war. So ADAF comes along and says, we need to federalize all sub-Saharan African countries. Why? Because no single African country on its own can transform itself. I see the ruptures in Kenya. I see the ruptures in Nigeria and so on. None of these African countries can transform ourselves because the internal enemies and the external enemies we face are too strong. So we must come together. So it means federalizing Africa. It means these are the 5 principles of ADAF. Demilitarization of our continent. All these military presence has to go. Right? It means economic protectionism. We can no longer keep opening up our borders, our economies for foreign interests to do as they want and as they see please. It means diplomatic isolationism, which means we need to get out of all this UN, WTO, etc., because they're not designed for our own empowerment. If you take the UN today, you have 5 countries in the Security Council: Russia, United States, Britain, France, China. Is China? Yes, China. Who made them gods amongst men? Who made them gods amongst men? That when you say something, the rest of the other 150 countries around the world must bow to you because you have a veto. Who? What kind of disrespect is that? And we operate under these multilaterals. We think this is normal? We Africans? Where is our sense of pride? Our sense of dignity? Are we going to allow that to continue? Some small boy from China will be sitting there in the UN telling me what to do. Oh, punish you. How many moments do we have?
You have no time.
Okay.
Because I want to open it up for questions. So I'm going to let you, when I'm timing, do a 2-minute wrap-up. What slide? This one?
Go down one.
Down, so forward like this?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That's right there.
2 minutes.
The question is, now I've described ADAF in very colorful terms. How is ADAF going to happen? What we need to happen, and this is very important right now, is what we need and what we are. Because by the way, so let me tell you what's going to happen. I'm not here just to write a book and to give you nice speeches. I'm actually dedicating myself and my life to this. What does that mean? It means that I am working behind the scenes right now with certain influences and powers, etc., to put together ADAF. Within the next 12 to 18 months, ADAF, the face of ADAF will be put together, made up of black dignitaries from around the world. And we're going to call a conference where we're going to tell the world, we're about to restructure this continent, don't put your face in it. And we're going to make all African governments aware that ADAF is now in time. Since gangsterism is what governs this world order, ADAF will become the new gangster in town that you people have never seen before. In the world of ADAF, there is no more discussion. We have outlined here, and we are streamlining the theology, the ideologies and the systems, etc. We have a direction that we're going to. It might not be perfect, but this is the direction to liberation. In 18 months, we're going to make a global announcement. We're going to invite the global press, and we're going to tell them what our agenda is. And we're also going to tell our African governments, you're either with us or you're against us. If you're against us, we're going to shut you down, no matter who you are, how big you think you are, what foreign allies you have, we will show you that power past power. We will show you that you are dealing with the new African variant. And let me explain to you what the new African variant is. Number one, we are no longer interested, like I said, in speaking with the world. We are going to do what we want, when we want, how we want. Number two, we are no longer interested in sharing power, having a seat at the table, asking you please. We are going to take absolute power. We are going to take control of our destiny. And number three, we are willing to go as far as anybody else has and further in the achievement of that objective. It is us or them. The battle of civilization is a zero-sum game. You're either winning or you're losing. I'll be dead if we lose in this century. I will not bring children into this world that will be losers again. They call me nigger 20 years ago when I started coming to this country. They're still calling me a nigger to my face 20 years later, 500 years later. When is enough time? When do we change the paradigm? I refuse for that paradigm to continue for my daughters, for my children. I want them to live in some kind of dignity. ADAF is what is going to bring that. And we're going to do it through what I call a technocratic revolution. And a technocratic revolution means we're not going to be... And so, in fact, my message to our brothers and sisters who are protesting in Nigeria and Kenya is hold steadfast. We are coming to the table. And how we are going to actualize ADAF is we are going to hold these governments by the neck. And the message is going to be simple. You come with us or you don't. And if you don't, we are going to deconstruct you politically and economically. We are going to shut down supply chains. We are going to shut down private sector entities, businesses, etc. until you sign up to the ADAF Accords. There will be a new force in town, a new way, a new law. And that's ADAF. And we'll see who is who. And then the eventual outcome of this is that we have, by 2030, we create ADAF and we move forward. And all of this is explained in the book. And I know I've said a lot. I've been trying to make
Oh my God. Is everybody okay? All right. We have 15 minutes for questions. Questions? Okay. So, oh wow. All right. Oh, okay. Oh, no, this is nice. All right. Be nice. This is live. I'm not motivated. All right.
My name is Emmanuel Naka. I'm from Imo State, Nigeria, of course. I wanted to know, so technocratic revolution, I guess I want to start there first. Is that a means of you would increase technological presence in the continent? Or is it, because I don't think, I always think about how people are talking about solar grids, right? That's a very, very good way of increasing energy production in Nigeria. But we don't have the infrastructure politically to implement this, because if the money's put in there, it'll be shaved off, it won't be implemented properly. So does technocratic mean that we're going to use technology to catch up, or are we using economic revolution?
No, it's actually much more tactical than that. So what I mean by technocratic revolution is that currently today, Africans are seeking revolution by protest, by coups, etc. You can see the restlessness across the continent, right? Is that we are all kind of fighting and saying, how do we get change from our governments? How do we break down this system that continues to oppress us? So the technocratic revolution that I'm talking about is, and what ADAF is going to do, is ADAF is going to come and centralize, coordinate, and amplify these various little revolutions that are happening across Africa. Right? So what does that mean? It means, for instance, that when we unveil ADAF, we're going to have a map of Africa. We're going to go country by country and say who's with us, who's against us in terms of those governments. So that's the public sector and the private sector. Let me give you an example of what I mean. By a technical, how this technocratic revolution is going to happen. So in Nigeria, for instance, we will have 10, 20 companies. Because by the way, these companies and these so-called business leaders in Nigeria are two sides of the same coin with the governments and so on that they parlay with. They're all in bed together. The biggest Yahoo boys in Nigeria are not boys sitting in internet cafes doing romance scams. They're UBA, GT Bank, all these banks, right? Where Yaya Bello, I think you know Yaya Bello, he's a minister that apparently recently he stole 80 billion naira and he's still on the run. When he goes and steals 80 billion naira, he doesn't go and use wheelbarrows to go and shift that money. He launders it through his banks. So some of these people, the likes, and sometimes people say don't mention names, but the likes of Tony Elumelu and so on, these are people that we held at the heads of these institutions. So we'll sit Tony down. And this is what I mean by centralizing, amplifying, and coordinating these mini revolutions. And we'll say to him, listen, you're with us, you're against us. If you're with us, what you're going to do, you're going to publish, right, the bank records of all government employees over the last 20 years. And in addition to that, you're going to freeze their accounts. And if you say no, we're going to cause a run on your bank. Not just in Nigeria, but throughout Africa. You see how you like that? And so what we're going to do, a technocratic revolution, because we can't have a military confrontation, because that's what they want, is that we are going to use economies of scale. We're going to bring everybody together. We're going to publish a playbook for each country and say, this is what the actions we're taking. If you, the people, are with us, this is what you need to do. We'll instruct everybody, pull your money out of this bank. We'll instruct commercial entities that do business with him to stop paying principal and interest on his loans, so he has a toxic portfolio. And if you, company, don't do that, we'll come for you too. If you, Dangote, continue to do business with Tony, we'll come for your trucks. We'll send everybody home. Nobody will work. And the beauty about the technocratic revolution, we're not breaking any laws. You see, for the longest time in Africa, we've been facing shadows. We don't know who our enemies are. So what will now happen is the hunted will now become the hunters. You see, a technocratic revolution is a cerebral exercise. We will show these people. We will show them. We will show them. You really think you have a monopoly on strategy and intelligence? We will show you there are levels to this.
And what shakes me is the fact that he's actually talking to people about it. Like the movement is starting.
Yes.
You mentioned.
Your name? Yes, and state.
What's your name? My name is Chudi. Did we say anything else? I'm from Anambra State. I live in Virginia. So you mentioned some of the development institutions I'm affiliated with. They actually compromise now, right? And you mentioned ADAF is like a step above these. I guess my question is how are you sure? How do you know ADAF never gets compromised?
No, fantastic. That's a wonderful question. If I am saying that everything, all our institutions are compromised, then how do you build an institution from all this compromise, all these compromised entities, even the human capital? And this is the beauty, and this is why you have to read the book. Because I explained ADAF like a machine. It's constructed like a machine. Some of you folks work in corporate, you understand the concept of risk management, etc. And some of you in investment banking, you understand the concept of Chinese walls, etc. So the statutes and the policies that govern ADAF will be such that no one entity, no one individual, no group or faction can actually corrupt it. Because one of the things that I made a list here about the 5, I call them 6 commandments for the black community. One is that we need to stop relying on individualized leadership and rely on systems. ADAF is a system. So for instance, all people who work for ADAF will be known as custodians. There's no chief of this, general this, etc. Everybody is going to be a flat organization. ADAF is an entity, you can't work more than 10 years at ADAF because we will not allow people to build spheres of influence. For instance, when there's a judiciary, whether there's a case that comes into ADAF, the ADAF organization that is adjudication on the matter will not even know who the person is. You have a case number, finished. If you break ADAF laws, whether you are president, this one, you have a case number, they look at the facts because it's a fact-based, a-religious entity and institution. And in the book, I lay out all the ways that we create ADAF to make it a matrix that can't be compromised, that can't be inserted. And I will go as far as saying this: if ADAF fails, forget about it. If we don't create this new entity to govern our affairs, social, and by the way, ADAF is only saying that we should aggregate 5 powers, right? 1 is monetary and fiscal policy. 2 is continental security and border control, right? 3 is governance, so ADAF will have oversight over all government activities, right? And then 4 or 5 is intercontinental development. You aggregate these 5 powers to ADAF, all these countries now have the room to grow, to mature, to transform at their pace. But what it will do is it will not allow African governments to continue to misabuse or abuse these powers, because these are the 5 powers that whenever they're abused, we have the macroeconomic and political issues that we have. Okay?
What was that? I'll come to, I have 3 more that we can take. There was 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
Hi, I'm Julian. I'm from Anambra State. Okay, so I kind of had a couple questions, but I guess I'll start off by saying, right now there's a revolution going on in Haiti. I know that like the global, population, and even many Haitians themselves might consider it to be like a terroristic thing going on.
Yeah.
Like, what's your sort of take on that?
Take on what's going on in Haiti. Yeah. Well, what's happening in Haiti could be what Nigeria looks like, depending on how the situation is handled, which would be very scary. Because what's happening in Haiti right now is that really gangs have taken over Port-au-Prince. For the most part, some of the other countries are not like that, but Port-au-Prince, they've taken over. So what I think about it, what's happening in Haiti is not necessarily a revolution. Because in my definition of what a revolution is, it's a tearing up and rewriting of the social contract between the people and their institutions and governments.
So, with regard to that, right, as I understand revolution, like they compose usually like 5 components or so. There's like proximate socioeconomic instability, there's injustice that goes on, there's elite infighting, so as ADAF comes into existence, what component of revolutionary characteristics will the organization take advantage of to become a player on the world stage?
No, fantastic. So, first of all, the way ADAF is going to come to the table, because I can tell you today that no single African government or no foreign interest would want to allow ADAF to happen.
Right, exactly.
Right. No, that's completely understood, because really what we're about is deconstructing this current kind of colonialist, capitalist world order. Remember I said this to you. We are in the era of the balanced civilizations. And what governs this era is what? Gangsterism. Might is right. If I'm able to exert my leverage on you, I win. ADAF's leverage is going to be the people. To the extent that we are successful in educating and bringing the people and communicating to the people around our cause, that we are powerful. Because if we can mobilize 1.2 billion sub-Saharan Africans behind us, who's going to stop us? If we can mobilize 13 million Nigerians, 10 million Nigerians, who's going to stop us in the Nigerian context? So the onus is on us to make sure that we have a message and a vision that is strong enough, and a system. The other thing about ADAF, in terms of our march towards this revolution that's going to happen, is we are going to make it a people-led revolution. What does that mean? It means that we are going to make it completely transparent. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to raise money in order to do some of the things we're going to do. But every single penny of that money we raise is going to be available to everybody to see. So this is not, oh, we're going to raise money, then we're going to do X, Y, and Z. The second thing is that we are going to publish the playbook, because ADAF is going to become a faceless entity. It will be led by everyone and no one. So even if you kill me today, right? Because we've published it, because we have multiple servers around the world, we have our websites, we have our social media, etc. We have our game plan. And so you mow down one set of people, you have another. The other thing is there'll be no backroom deals. When we get Tinubu to come and talk to us, we'll be there on live Zoom. Oh yeah, sit there. These are the terms. Are you with us or are you against us? Right? So it's so important in a revolutionary process that you keep it people-led, right? And you keep it transparent and you maintain the integrity of it. Because then that way, the people will believe in it. When we say go left, the people will go left. When we say right, when we give them the reasons why. Every month we'll be communicating to the people on the state of the revolution, where we are, who's against us, who's for us. We will publicize this. You see, this war that's been waged upon us, it will now be in the open. This is going to be open declaration or open acceptance and recognition of the warfare that the world has been waging on us. So we're going to make our agenda very clear. So this way, it's not just Nnamdi and a few people who are leading this fight, it is all of us. You can't kill all of us. Okay.
Sorry, in the back.
No, the truth. Truth is your truth.
Uche.
Yes, I'm a Money number. I've actually come from Manchester in the UK.
Oh, wow.
So I'm part of the ICSN network, so that's the Igbo Cultural Support Network. So I'm actually the president of the Manchester branch over there. So I think kicking off this event with you was perfect, because I've been able to gauge exactly what it is we're doing here. Obviously, we have a mission. So as somebody who's actually in line with what you're speaking with, I can resonate with this, what you're saying. As a young Igbo man myself, what I want to ask you is, on this journey, two things, what got you so invested in what you're doing? And the second thing is, what kept you going as well? Because I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Hold on. Okay. Just because of time. Uche, did you get here at the beginning?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I feel like you talked about that journey and how his system was hard.
I think there was just a lot of...
Okay, no, the answer is...
Oh, I would say very
But
quickly.
the reason I stopped is because you want to get him started on that.
One thing.
Yes.
Someone's car, right?
Did anybody park a white Pathfinder in the front of here?
And he came in the room and
They're about
sat
to tow the
down.
car. So if you have a white Pathfinder that you
person is
parked in
not
the front, they're about to tow the car. If you have a friend that has a white Pathfinder, they're about to tow the car. Sorry.
Okay.
Not five for this one, for the question.
Yeah, no problem. What got me started in this process? Empathy and shame. Empathy and shame. When I was in Guinea, we're all Africans, we see levels of suffering, but let me tell you what suffering looks like. When I was in Guinea, I used to see these albino kids being pimped by somebody, walking the street, begging, chasing people to beg them. A lot of these kids, 5 and 6 years old. A few of them, half of their faces, half of their bodies was saturated with open scabs. Because albino children are not supposed to be in the sunlight. And I'm not sure any of you are there experienced Guinean sun. It's a hell of a sun. So basically, these kids will be in that traffic with dirty clothes, hungry, with the pollution on them, and then the sun is literally burning them alive. They have scabs all through their body, and I used to see this. And the thing about me is I never became immune to the suffering that I was seeing in our lives. And I asked myself, why is this child going through this? By the way, his suffering didn't end there. Because when it came to political seasons, you see a lot of these albino kids missing. Why? Because the politicians would use them as sacrifice to do rituals. What is hell on earth if it isn't that? If you're a child running in traffic, hungry, with dirty clothes, and you are burning literally alive. That is hell on earth. And so empathy is what got me down this road, because I left Nigeria when I was 7 years old, right? And so I've gone around the world, etc., but I never forgot where I came from. And so this is what sustains me, and this is what makes me say that this is the last generation of us that will be losers of this value of civilization. Thank you.
Your name is?
Chiemela.
Chiemela.
Yes, I'm from Afro State. So, I guess growing up, like you said, having our parents and talking about what you've kind of written a book about, I think over the years, at least me, you grow a little bit pessimistic because you see year after year nothing has changed. And so maybe this is a little bit pessimistic, but I can, because, you know, European countries, even America, even Asian countries, like you mentioned, have so much investments in the subjugation of African continent. Even if this is, did you say technocratic revolution? I can see it becoming a military issue because those countries have, for centuries, you know, killed off the black man.
Nigeria has soldiers marching
Yeah,
in the street.
for
because they're
unprovoked, and now this is a huge provocation. So I guess my question is, for those of us who have that fear, how do you intend to, or how do you plan to rally enough?
It's a beautiful question. It's an excellent question. So chapter 6 in the book is called Nothing to Fear But Fear Itself. I wrote that chapter and I eventually became therapy for me because sometimes, as you said, I look at the odds against this African Renaissance and it seems impossible because it's always been. Now, the purpose of that chapter is I gave an example of various civilizations who have seemed to just beat insurmountable odds. My dear, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. I can tell you that. I can tell you that through my own personal life experiences. And I can tell you with strategy that there is no enemy that we can beat. Remember, we are the African variant. And what makes us unique, again, is that we know everything they do, but they don't know what we know. We will show them. And we will show them, and I'm not asking you to believe just by faith alone, but we will give you the mechanisms to be dangerous. We'll give you the mechanisms for winning, because that's what this book is about. Because this book is a technocratic book. I wrote it without emotion. Because I am a believer in strategy and tactics, and that is what is unique, especially about us as Igbo people, is we're very good at that. That's why we are good at commerce. And I will tell you this, we will outthink them. They will try and introduce violence, we will be to no avail to them because we will be like shadows for them. They will know who they will hit. We won't break any, there are so many things that we put into the process that will allow everybody to be able to engage. So what I would say to you is have faith, have belief, but have faith and belief in tangible ways. And just know there's nothing to fear but fear itself. We're going to change this narrative. God will punish these people.
She has done like this so many times. Nandi, thank you. Thank you for feeling the empathy and not allowing it to fade away. Because every one of us, if you've ever been home, has felt the empathy. We felt it. Even here, for non-Nigerians, you see black kids on the streets, and I know how they look at them. I was telling my brother, I was walking, and we were in Milton. If you live in Atlanta, Milton is in white Atlanta. And my son was going to take out the trash, but he needed to take the trash down the hill to the street for trash pickup here. I have, at the time I was 17, but my son is a 17, 6'2". And so I'm standing outside, and I go, well, something, he's trying to pull the trash in, and this lady's walking with her son and her daughter, who maybe is 8 or 9, and she moves her to the other side of her. And I said, if only you knew that this boy, paper cuts, he will carry his hand like this. But you see him, and you immediately see something that maybe the media and the world has told you should maybe be afraid of. And I'm not saying this because we don't know racism. I'm saying this that even with the Arabs, even with every part of it, is why are you at the bottom of the pile? So thank you for writing this book and for this clarion call. I want to say, if you have one last thing to say, but no, we'll say one last thing in 7 minutes. This is the issue of God. So, the book is on Amazon.
The book is on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Nobles. It's in hard copy, ebook forms. It's on Spotify. So there's an audiobook version. And please spread the word. My mission is to have. I am traveling to Europe, to the Caribbean. I'm here. I'm in Africa. Is to have this book in every single black household. I know all of you participate in your mama men and religion. But this is our way to liberation. That is not an opinion or a thought. That is a message. It is finally here. You know when you've been waiting for something for so long and then finally you're like, is it here? Our turn is now. Our turn is now. And you will see it within the next 18 months. I guarantee you that. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming out. I hope you enjoyed the analogy. And Lucy, thank you so much for moderating for us. So convention weekend has